a friend of mine, Kyle, he's a KU grad, he threw out a question to me. He was curious about, OU and Texas are leaving, and they were the perpetual string pullers off the field in the Big 12. Who are going to be the new ones that are going to try to do that? How long will that take, I wonder? And who are going to be the ones who are going to run things on the field? I think the last couple of years, though, Craig, of at least on the field, because I think we'll get to off the field in a second, on the field has shown us that there's nobody that if you take the gigantic brand name of Texas who wasn't in this conversation and the team that owned the conference forever, Oklahoma, out of it, there's paired, like everybody's pretty much set up the same way. And it's going to be a couple of bounces and breaks and the right players here and there that make you either the Big 12 champion, middle of the pack, or all of a sudden, how do we get to 3-9?
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's there should be a lot of parity. We just got done talking about TCU a little while ago. I know K-State feels good about the direction of things, and Texas Tech feels good about what's bubbling up right now. They've got to go out on the field and actually do it. The other two have, but there's a lot of reason to believe that they can beginning next year, and even really beginning last year with 8 wins right out of the gate. Baylor, they're in kind of a weird spot right now, but they're entirely capable of jumping up. And here's the thing is, I don't know about their talent level, but I know they've got good coaching. I know they've got good coaching, and I feel like even in games where they were clearly not the more talented team last year, their coaching had them in some of those games or had them in opportunities to win games. So they're going to be, tough more often than not, I think, for teams, but it's anyone's guess. I'd say, TCU and K-State are a good place to start, but I don't know that I would really have too much confidence in just labeling anybody as the new kings of the conference a la OU. You need to do more than win 1 or 2 titles. You better win 6 of those bad boys in a 8-year span for me to consider you the dominant name. And we need a little time to pass for that to happen. So, yeah, it's some teams that, been there, done that as far as winning the conference. Some have, flirted with bigger things. But, without the Oklahoma-Texas factors and then with, some new faces where you don't really quite know what to expect right away from them, it's going to be really fascinating to see how it all kind of comes together and what comes out on the other end of it.
Well, and look, TCU was the test case. And granted, they were in even a different spot than everybody else who's kind of coming in. And, of course, it was still even moderately a different era in college football then. But when they came in, they'd come off of dominating the conferences that they were in and winning the Rose Bowl and all that with Andy Dalton. And then they step into the Big 12. They're already set up to be pretty good, and Gary Patterson had them right where they needed to be until he, his carton of milk expired, so to speak, with the way that he did things. And so I wonder if there's a team like that that's set up if you look at, Gus Malzahn has been at UCF very long, but they've had, spots of pretty good success over the last decade. Cincinnati was just in the college football playoff, but the coach who did that is gone. BYU's had a long tenured coach, and I don't think Kalani Sitake's really going anywhere. And then who did I leave out there?
Houston.
Houston is in a pretty transitional phase, I think, right now when it comes to their roster because they've been raided by the transfer portal a little bit and, lost a couple-year quarterback and are trying to readjust that and be in a new league. So I don't know if anybody can hit the ground running like TCU did, but they still have the test case of you put a team from another league into a Power 5 league and, water the garden, it'll grow, And so I don't know who that's going to be the fastest, but it's not like there's not proof that it can happen. So I don't know what you're asking. Are you? I wonder who is that team you think that would be ready to hit the ground running like TCU was, at least to a moderate degree, because again they were coming off a Rose Bowl when they got pulled into the league.
Yeah, I think Houston's not going to be very good right away. At least on paper, it doesn't seem like they will be. That's one of those you're like, are they going to even make a bowl game? And I just think the shape that they're in, maybe there's a little bit of a delay in achieving success right out the gates. I really don't know, man, because I'm still learning about these teams too. I've watched Oklahoma State every year for 20 years and K-State, and now we've seen TCU for well over a decade. But certainly wouldn't have predicted when they first arrived that they'd be doing what they're doing at this point. But BYU makes sense because of the scheduling, that they've had previously. That's just, there's not going to be that much of a difference than Cincinnati. They're a playoff team, and I think Satterfield's a good enough coach with enough experience that it's not like they're, hiring some no-name guy to come in there and, scoop up the pieces left over by Luke Fickell. But, yeah, I'd say UCF and BYU probably would lean BYU, but I don't really know who's going to be the best team out of those four next year. I guess maybe one of those two. I'd have more faith in one of those two, but I don't know. Yeah, one of those two, but I don't feel like supremely confident about it, obviously. And I just think that, TCU is also not the norm, Mm-hmm. I mean, they are not what everybody's just going to end up being, they jumped up a level and now this is what happens when you do that. It's like, no, not everybody jumps up and then turns into what they turned into. I think they're a unique case study. So, yeah, they have a path that they drew up that you can follow to some extent. But if I had to pick, then, yeah, BYU or UCF seem like, at least initially, they're well-equipped, and I'd probably lean BYU if I had to make a choice. But, not putting any wager on that or anything like that.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, I just don't know enough about everything. I've seen more of BYU in the last couple of years, just because, especially 2 years ago when they played Baylor, I kind of watched them a little bit more after that because I enjoyed that game so much, and I was like, yeah, I kind of like watching this team play. So if they were on, I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to tune in and watch them, knowing also that they were coming to the league at that point, just because I was curious. I don't know. Off the field, do you think – I don't know if, I can even answer that question, because Texas in particular was so powerful at pulling the strings and so in control of everything for so long. I do think that at least right now, everybody stands on equal footing because they don't have the options that Texas and Oklahoma have. They can't Texas Tech couldn't just get up in the morning and threaten to leave like Texas could. They couldn't. I'm not trying to dog Texas Tech, because there are 11 other schools that couldn't do the same thing. So I don't know if somebody's going to be able to dictate things like that, but I do wonder who the, I hate this term, but thought leaders of the conference are going to be in pushing it in a direction, who are going to be the strongest, off the field maneuverers, so to speak.
That's not something I've given a lot of thought to, just because it's kind of nice to not have to feel like you need to worry about that. But, I mean, that's certainly, a power vacuum that somebody or somebody's will occupy. And, as far as that goes, like the politics side of things, I feel like, Mack Rhoades is somebody who's obviously very well respected, but I think TCU's leaders, Texas Tech's leaders are – also, very well respected. Jeremiah Donati, Kirby Hocutt, the presidents as well. I think those three kind of stick out because they're Texas-based schools as well. They've had some success, shown flashes of what they can be. Tech feels like they're on the verge of something. They kind of need to get over that probably hump here pretty soon, but it feels like the last couple of years they've been on the the verge of something with basketball. Then, football now starting to pick up its weight. TCU's obviously had immense success. Baylor's had good amount of success, and we know that, Rhoades is heavily involved. We know Donati is heavily involved, Hocutt, et cetera. So that's kind of where I look, but I'm Texas-based, so maybe I'm ignoring Oklahoma State's leaders or West Virginia's leadership, and I'm not intending to, but, this is still going to be a Texas-based conference in so many ways, even though there's a lot more non-Texas schools now. But, yeah, I'd still figure it would probably roll back around to some of those types of guys.
Well, Kansas, if you look at the biggest individual brand team, Kansas has that with their basketball. Like, that's the most.
My answer is I don't think there's going to be a DeLoss Dodds. There's not going to be a Joe Castiglione. I think it's just going to be, somebody's going to have to rise up and be like that quote-unquote leader, but I think it might kind of rotate off, and that'd probably be the smart way to do it, because I don't really feel like there is anybody, even if they're long tenured and they've been around for forever and ever, like a Gordon Gee, I think that there's kind of an agreement across the board of, no, none of us are going to outdo or step over the other. Kirby Hocutt's not going to become DeLoss Dodds or Mac Rhodes is going to be Joe C. Those guys were unique. They had unique power behind them as well. And so even if you have somebody that's maybe more of a leader outwardly, they don't have the backing that Texas has or that Oklahoma has, the cachet. So I think it'd be difficult to kind of separate yourself in that regard anyways, unless you are commanding a team. Like if it was Donati with TCU and they go and they make the playoff again, and then basketball is really, and they start to kind of dominate. That's where you could maybe see somebody potentially emerge if one school clearly stood out. But I don't think there's anybody right now at the moment financially, viewership, or just success-wise. It's all that different from the others.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I mean, obviously they're losing two big schools and one gigantic school in Texas as far as like size-wise, and they're replacing it with some big schools, including UCF, which is, I believe, even bigger than Texas right now as far as like humans on the campus goes. So, I just don't. I think that, and part of the thing is that they've set it up now to where, or they at least have been trained over the years of having to deal with Texas and Oklahoma kind of pulling those strings, to where now, at least for the first wave of this, they don't have to do that anymore. They can all be on equal footing and have discussions without, like when the realignment thing came up a few years ago, and they had this kind of fake, like, yeah, we're going to take applications and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, Texas and Oklahoma didn't want to do it, so it went nowhere. And Oklahoma's president was the one who was like, oh, yes, we are certainly looking into it. And, we're going to have a committee and we're going to do job interviews, and, everybody's going to send us a video with, what's great about their campus and their setting, and it's going to be great. So send in your care packages to Big 12 Realignment Committee. We're right here. And then that was pretty much a waste of everybody's time, because it wasn't going to happen at that time, because Texas knew you didn't want it to happen. It was just words at the time. So, yeah, I don't think that stuff's really going to happen, at least in the short term. So I don't know. Look, BYU's a gigantic fan base and all that, and have tons of influence, and they're another religious school, and they're a religious school that's a gigantic religion. So I would think that they're going to try to move their weight around as much as they can, but I don't think for a minute, and maybe I'm naive here, that they're going to be like Texas was, where they just walk in a meeting.
Absolutely effing not. Yeah, they're not going to roll in and be bossing people around, because everybody else will say, who are you? And okay,
you're new here.
There's a lot of you, but there's one entity ultimately, and there's 13 of us. So sorry, you're not going to get your way. And no, there's no Texas rolling in. There's no Texas remaining. I think there's a lot of schools that are even, and any idea that any of the four will roll in and be like suddenly grabbing the leash and leading the others behind them, I think is ridiculous. That's definitely not where my brain would go. But it also wouldn't go to any of the holdovers, taking that mantle either. Like I said a few minutes ago, I think it's going to be a combination. And if somebody were to just have some mega amount of success, and maybe they inch up over, some of their fellowship. But beyond that, I mean, yeah, that's the whole idea behind this new iteration of the conference, is that there's no two, or before there was multiple, the very beginning of the Big 12, big powerhouse Powerbrokers. I mean, that's just is not the case. There's some mid-sized that have potential to grow larger, but yeah, there's nothing in comparison to Texas and Oklahoma that makes you think of the way that things have been. It's a new era for sure.
No, absolutely not. All right, we'll take another break right here when we come